Hi everyone, Stepan here. In this video I'm going to show you my favorite game so far. The feeling I had after this game was of complete bliss, extreme excitement, and I just wanted to tell everybody about it. I faced a 200 points high rated opponent whom I faced before 2 years ago when we drew. Now usually with white he plays the London system, and I've been preparing for the London system exclusively, basically, because that's the thing he plays 99% of the time. Excuse me. And he did play it against me the last time we played. In this game, though, he started with pawn to b3. Now, if you saw my video on reverse London setups, if you haven't, you can have a look at it. But against the Nimzo Larsen, you can play the reverse London and have absolutely no problems. There is no need to enter those extremely sharp lines after e5. So I played d5, bishop b2, knight f6, e3. It's possible to play knight f3 here as well. There are several ways for white to play. He can also play with g3. My opponent chose e3, which is basically the reverse Queen's Indian or the reverse Dutch, depending on what he does next. And I played bishop to f5. Now here, white can go bishop e2. White can play several different things, but my opponent played f4. So the reverse Dutch. With the bishop already on b2, this is a nice reverse Dutch. And I actually played this position with both black and white. So I played the Dutch with black, I played the Dutch with white, or the bird opening, and I also played the Queen's Indian with both colors. So I was very familiar with this. And after the game, he told me, well, I wanted to surprise you. I don't really know much about this system, but I decided to play it anyway. By the way, I should mention my opponent is a great guy. And his team, I know some of his teammates as well. So yeah, f4. Okay, let's complete the London. e6, knight f3, bishop e7. In these positions, you don't really want your bishop on d6 because sometimes you want to trade it off for the very good bishop on b2. And because e4 is the biggest weakness in the position, you would like to play knight e4 and then, as I said, bishop f6. This trade, these two pieces being traded off, definitely favors black. Okay, my opponent played pawn to d3, playing the classical Dutch. I should say that the most prudent way to play this position and the best way to play this position for white is to play bishop e2 and castle. And the Dutch is very risky. I know, as I said, I played with both colors. You want to get your king to safety and then start attacking. You make too many pawn moves and then you may get in trouble. The thing with the London setup against it is that this bishop is actually perfect and it creates a lot of tension here. It cannot be opposed easily. Fine, it can with knight h4, but that's wasting too much time. So d3 is not a bad move, but it's risky from a human perspective. And since my opponent played pawn to d3, I can play way more actively than with the normal London. You basically have a free hand in the center and you can play c5 and knight c6. I don't have to play with c6. So this is what I usually do when my opponents don't have a pawn on d4. It's just more active to have a knight on c6 than on d7. And you don't want a knight on c6 if your pawn is on c7. Unless you have pressure on c2 with knight c6, knight b4, which you don't in this case because your bishop is blocked by the pawn on d3. So playing knight c6 would make no sense. Playing c6 would be unnecessarily passive. Okay, knight b to d2. Again, not playing bishop e2 and castles, which is risky. Now we can see a downside already. Once I play knight c6, he is actually in huge trouble. He's not too much worse, but he has to be extremely careful. There are two weaknesses in the position. There's e3 and there is c2, and I have both knight b4 and knight g4. So unless he does something now, I'm going to get a winning position straight away. Now, there are several ways to play this. I think bishop e2 is simply the best move still. Allowing knight to g4 and then playing knight f1, followed up by h3, and then the knight moves, you go g4, and maybe you can get away with this. I do have bishop h4 check, but this should be best. You can also play h3, preventing knight g4, but that fails to d4, and in this position black is much, much better. If takes, then knight d5, and this is overwhelming, threatening here and here. And if after d4 they play e4, you simply go bishop g6. And now you have so much space. You have the g3 square. You have the h4 square. You can block the queen side completely with b5, b4. And you have a lot of squares for your pieces. I mean, eventually white is going to have to develop, but it's not going to be easy. c3 is also not going to be easy to achieve with d3 so weak. But these two moves were best. My opponent made, I'm going to say, close to losing mistake. He played pawn to g3. He tried to combine the Leningrad and the classical, which simply doesn't work. And also g3 just allows knight g4. Now here's the problem. You think you can play queen e2, but you cannot play queen e2. If you play queen e2, I go knight b4 and you resign. Because I'm threatening knight takes, well, I'm threatening knight takes, queen takes, knight c2. If you go back, I'm going to take on e3. If you defend with the rook, I'm going to take on a2. And then just come back. And for example, here I just go bishop f6, trade off my worst piece for your best piece, and should be winning. Again, c3 and c4 not possible here. The a pawn is not here anymore, so whenever you move your c pawn, I take on d3. Whenever you play h3, I take on b2 and play knight f6 if you defend your bishop. And if you trade, I can take with both queen and the knight. I would have taken with the knight just to make sure I don't have to retreat after h3. So after knight g4, you have to play king e2, which is already very weird. And here, when I was analyzing this game with my coach, he said, and this was very instructive for me, maybe it's going to be instructive for you. He said two things. The first thing is I didn't want to look at this game with him because I prefer to analyze my losses with him. My coach is 2350, a very strong international master, so I prefer to go over my losses. But he said, okay, you could have played better in this one as well. You can always improve on your wins too. And he asked me, which moves did you consider here? Okay, and in the game I played bishop f6, which is not bad. I said I considered bishop f6, I considered rook c8, I considered knight b4, I considered castles, and I considered d4. And here he said, okay, stop, d4. Why didn't you play d4? I said, well, okay, strategically, my e7 bishop is my worst piece, his b2 bishop is his best piece. I would like to trade them off. He said, fine, I agree. Then I said, also, when we trade bishops, I'm going to get my knight back to f6, which is going to be, well, away from the h3 tempo, and also supporting e4 and g4. He said, okay. And then I said, I didn't want to play d4 because I was unsure what happens. And, I mean, shortly afterwards, I saw that it was just winning with d4. So basically, the same thing applies as in the previous position. After e takes d4, I go knight d4 check, and once he takes, I take. I have the e3 square permanently, and this is just. I'm basically threatening knight e3, bishop g4. I don't think there's a way out. The engine says minus 3.5, so it's completely losing. For humans, it may not be that easy, but it should be easy. And after d4, e4. Again, I retreat with bishop to g6, and I have the e3 square. So this seems fairly easy. Again, c3 not easy to play. For example, knight c4, preventing knight e3. I just go b5, he goes h3, I take. He takes, and I go c3. And this, again, is just seems like it's game over. Okay, this was the most instructive point for me in my analysis. Okay. So bishop f6 played instead, which is okay. Bishop f6, knight f6. And here I want to put pressure on his position, mainly on the d file and on the d2 square, because, and I started thinking about knight e4. Knight e4 doesn't work in this position. He played h3, I should mention, preventing bishop g4, knight g4, and preparing g4, and I played h5. He played bishop g2 here. Knight e4 doesn't work yet, but if I can get enough attackers on d2, then it is going to work, and it's going to win straight away. Because g3 is going to be attacked, king f2 is going to be impossible, he's going to have to take the knight. Once he takes, I recapture with the d pawn, and then the f3 knight is attacked, and the d2 knight will be attacked. So that was my thinking. So I played queen a5. I want to go rook d8 next, or castles queenside, to make sure I have double pressure on d2. Okay, he played a3, which I don't think is a very useful move, but okay. Rook to d8, and here he played king f2. I mean, just inviting knight e4, just begging me to play it. And my calculation, now first I'm going to tell you what I was calculating without moving the pieces. This may be a good exercise for you. My calculation was fine, flawed in one detail. Okay, so here's what happens. Knight e4. If he doesn't take, I take on g3. If knight e4, d4, then d4, attacking both knights, he has to play b4 to prevent rook takes d2 check. So he plays b4. I play c takes b4. And then he can either go knight d4 or knight g5. If he plays knight d4, that's easy. Knight d4, e d4, rook d4 should be... Well, it's almost equal material, but my pieces are so much better that it should be winning. So again, knight e4, d4, d4, b4, cb4, knight d4, knight d4, e d4, rook d4. Easy. And if knight e4, d4, d4, b4, cb4, knight g5, I would like to play either b3 or ba3 so that I can unleash my queen on the d2 knight. But here's the problem. He plays c3. Blocking my queen. And once I play queen takes c3, he plays knight g takes e4, attacking my queen. Okay? And once I take bishop takes e4, knight takes e4, I have queen b2 check, getting away from the attack. He blocks with queen e2, and I play f5. I'm not sure if you could follow this. I'm going to show it to you on the board, but that was my calculation. Now it was flawed in one detail. Let me show you where. Okay, so knight e4, d4, d4, has to play b4. Okay, has to play b4. I have to play cb4. Now in the game he did play knight d4, and it was much easier for me to play after this because I took, rook takes, and now knight to b3, rook d1, knight a5, and rook d2 check. That's what happened in the game. After cb4, knight g5 was much stronger. And I actually analyzed this with my coach during the same session, and neither me nor him have managed to find the flaw in my analysis. He just said, okay, so knight e4 worked, everything worked. It didn't. Let me show you why. After knight g5, b3 and ba3 are the same. I just win a pawn with ba3. So let's say ba3. Okay, c3, queen c3, knight g takes e4, attacking my queen, so I don't have time to take on d2 because he takes with the knight. So I take bishop e4, knight e4. Again, if I take his queen, he takes my queen. So I play queen b2 check. And here is the point. After queen e2, I go f5. This was the end of my analysis. I thought to myself, okay, this is completely winning. Why? Because if he takes my queen, I take with the pawn, attacking both the rook and the knight. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. He plays rook hb1. And now white is much better. I have to take the queen. Obviously, if he takes my queen, then it is winning for me. I take the queen, king takes, pawn takes knight. Equal material, but not equal material. I'm 3 pawns up. But my rooks are worse, my pawns are worse, my king is worse, my structure is ruined. He plays rook b7. I castle, he plays bishop e4. And this is just winning for white. Why is it winning for white? My knight is attacked, 2 of my pawns are attacked, my pawn structure is destroyed, my king is not safe, his rooks are coming to the 7th rank. I just didn't see that. I didn't see that. But in the game, after king f2, and neither did my coach, who is 2350, so I'm not too sad. Okay, knight e4 check, d4, d4. I should say that I only found rook h to be 1 after my first analysis is always alone. I go through my games myself. Then I go through them with my coach. Then I go through them with an engine. I found rook hb1 with an engine. I just thought knight e4 was winning straight away. It wasn't. It was actually losing if white plays perfectly. But he's a human. Okay, so again, what happened in the game? b4, cb, knight d4, takes, 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 knight b3, takes, takes, rook d2, check. Okay, king to g1, rook takes c2, a takes b4, and b6. Now, knight to b7 is very risky. It could lose the knight. It probably would lose the knight. So knight to b3 is a more prudent move. Castles. And here, I'd actually calculated further than this before knight e4. And in this position, I was expecting knight to d4. I just thought he has to play knight d4. And I'm probably slightly better. My idea was to go rook c4. He takes on f5, takes, rook a7, rook b4. And maybe here he plays king h2. And I don't know, I go rook b2, get my other rook into play. He has a piece for 3 pawns. My pawns are great, but probably white could hold. So that's what I'd expected after knight e4. Instead of that, he lost the game in one move. He played rook takes pawn, and this is game over. Why? Because I go rook d8. And there is no way for him to develop all of his pieces. The knight is loose. The bishop is going to be pinned if he wants to get his h1 rook into play. My e3 pawn is going to queen, and my other rook is coming to the second rank. There's no way to save the position now. He played king h2, I played e3, threatening bishop e4. He played rook ha1, preparing to meet bishop e4 with any rook to e2. I could still win with bishop e4, but I found a better way to win. So if I go bishop e4, he plays rook a2. I go e2. He takes on c2, and I take, and then the knight is attacked, and I'm threatening to queen, or I'm threatening to play rook d1 and then queen. So he has to play rook e1, and I take here, and this is, you can see that this is easily winning. Why? Because my king is better, his pawns are worse. He is still pinned if he moves the rook from the second rank. So bishop e4 wasn't that clear. There's an easier move to win. I just go rook d3, and now it's dead lost. Why? Because if he plays knight here, I can just go here and win. For example, here, I just win the bishop. What else can he do? After rook d3, he defended the knight with rook a3, but now bishop e4 works, because if he plays rook a2 in this position, then takes the knight, and no, excuse me, no, wait. Ah, no, sorry. If he plays rook a2 in this position, I just take the knight. Excuse me, and then here and here. Wait. Ah, no, okay, sorry. Then here and here. Yeah, excuse me. Sorry about this. And again, my pawn is going to queen. So after bishop to e4, he played rook to g1. And now simply bishop to b5. Now he is pinned on both sides, and this is the most beautiful position I ever had in my game. My feeling of happiness during this moment is inexplicable. He played knight a1, but now a simple tactical solution to win the game. Rook takes g2, rook takes g2, rook a3. He tried knight c2, rook c3, rook e2, and now the final move of the game was bishop to f3. Again, if he moves the rook, I win the knight. If he takes on e3, I take the knight. If he takes on e3 with the knight, then I take the rook, and yeah, just game over. So this is my favorite game so far. Hopefully it's going to get beaten by another game soon, but I was really happy about this. Let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.